Ever noticed how an INFJ can sit in complete silence while the entire room feels too loud? They're not bored, they're not detached, they're just processing everything, every word, every facial twitch, every emotional current that passes through the air like invisible static. The INFJ doesn't just hear you, they feel you. But what's strange is, for someone who feels so much, they rarely say anything. This is the paradox of the INFJ, the quietest personality type that carries the loudest emotional world. In this video, we're going to peel back the psychology of that silence. Why do INFJs absorb everything, yet speak so little? Why do they feel everyone else's emotions more intensely than their own? And what happens inside that storm of empathy they rarely show? Let's dive right in. All right, first thing first, the mirror effect. INFJs don't just sense emotions, they become them. It's one of their most mysterious and misunderstood traits. When they walk into a room, they don't just notice the atmosphere, they absorb it. Their empathy works like a mirror, reflecting every emotion around them with startling accuracy. If someone's anxious, their own stomach tightens. If someone's joyful, they can feel that warmth ripple through their chest. They become emotional chameleons, blending into the energy of whoever they're near, often without even realizing it. Psychologists call this emotional contagion, the subconscious exchange of feelings between people. But for INFJs, it's more than just contagion, it's immersion. They feel like antennas tuned into everyone's frequency all at once, downloading emotions like data streams that never stop. That's why crowded places can be so draining. It's not the noise or the people. It's the flood of unfiltered emotional input crashing into their nervous system. It's like being hit by waves that never let you catch your breath. And because they feel so deeply, they often mistake other people's emotions for their own. And they carry sadness that isn't theirs, and they wrestle with anger that doesn't belong to them. Imagine trying to live your life while constantly feeling 10 different emotional realities layered over your own. It's no wonder INFJs need so much time alone. Solitude isn't about escaping people. It's about resetting the signal. What makes this even more fascinating and viral worthy is how invisible this process is. On the outside, an INFJ might seem calm, quiet, and perfectly fine. But inside, they're decoding the room like an emotional Sherlock Holmes, reading every glance, every tone, shift, every hidden tension. Their silence in those moments isn't emptiness, it's calculation. They're mentally mapping out everyone's emotional landscape before they decide what to say, if anything at all. Here's the psychological twist. That same gift that makes them so empathetic also makes them prone to burnout. The brain interprets emotional pain the same way it interprets physical pain. So when the INFJ feels someone else's heartbreak, their own body reacts as if it's been wounded. Their empathy literally hurts. And when that happens day after day, the only thing left to do is withdraw. Not to escape others, but to find themselves again underneath all that noise. This is the paradox that makes INFJs so magnetic. They feel everything, see everything, and understand everyone, yet very few people ever truly see them. Because while the world projects its emotions onto their mirror, the INFJ quietly disappears into the reflection. And next up, we've got emotional overload equals emotional silence. For most people, emotions come in waves. They rise, they fall, and they pass. But for INFJs, those waves never really stop. Every feeling, every thought, every word echoes in their mind long after the moment has ended. What others can brush off in seconds, an INFJ will replay for days, analyzing, dissecting, and feeling it all over again. Their emotional memory is almost photographic. They don't just remember what happened, they remember exactly how it felt. This constant processing creates what psychologists call emotional saturation. It's when the brain and body are so full of emotional input that they physically can't take it anymore. For an INFJ, that's when the silence begins. It's not a choice, it's a reflex. Their system starts to shut down in order to protect itself from emotional burnout. The words dry up, their eyes go distant, and they withdraw into a quiet space inside their own mind where they can finally breathe again. And here's the irony. People often mistake this silence for indifference. They'll say, "You don't care," or "You're shutting me out," without realizing that the INFJ is actually overwhelmed by caring too much. Their silence isn't the absence of emotion. It's the overflow of it. When the internal volume gets too high, speaking feels impossible. Words would only spill the chaos instead of explaining it. Think of it like this. The INFJ's inner world is a room filled with 100 radios playing at once. One station is their own voice, calm, analytical, reflective. But every other frequency belongs to someone else. The friend who's hurting, the coworker who's angry, the stranger on the subway who seems sad for no reason. Eventually, the only way to find clarity is to turn the volume off completely. That's what emotional silence really is. The moment the INFJ reaches for the power switch. But here's the part that hits hard. When they go quiet, they're not just processing what happened. They're trying to understand why it affected them so deeply. Was it compassion? Was it guilt? Was it unresolved pain disguised as empathy? That introspection is where their real healing begins. It's how they transform emotion into wisdom. Not by reacting outwardly, but by journeying inward until everything starts to make sense. And that's what makes the INFJ's silence so powerful. It's not avoidance, it's alchemy. They take the noise of the world, absorb it, and turn it into understanding. But until that transformation is complete, they can't speak, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're still translating chaos into clarity. Third on the list, the calm mask illusion. On the surface, the INFJ looks perfectly composed. Calm voice, steady eyes, a gentle nod that makes you feel heard. But what most people never realize is that beneath that calm exterior, there's an entire storm raging. Every emotion, every conflict, every tiny vibration of energy around them, it's all being processed in silence. What looks like serenity is actually emotional containment. It's the calm mask illusion. The INFJ wears this mask not to deceive others, but to protect both sides, themselves and the people they care about. They've learned, often the hard way, that not everyone can handle the full intensity of their emotions. Their sadness can feel too heavy, their anger too sharp, their empathy too consuming. So they hold it in. They regulate, dilute, and filter their feelings before letting them surface. They smile even when they're unraveling. They joke softly when they're on the verge of tears. Because showing the real depth of their emotion has, in the past, been met with blank stares, discomfort, or even judgment. Over time, this becomes instinctive. The INFJ reads the room, senses the mood, and adjusts their tone like a social thermostat. If people are tense, they become soothing. If people are chaotic, they become still. They morph into what's needed, not out of manipulation, but out of empathy. But here's the catch, that adaptability comes at a cost. Each time they silence their true feelings, they lose a small piece of authenticity. And slowly, they begin to forget what their unfiltered emotions even sound like. Psychologically, this is called emotional masking, a coping mechanism often seen in highly sensitive individuals. It's how the mind hides its chaos to maintain harmony. The INFJ tells themselves, "I'm fine," not because they believe it, but because it keeps others comfortable. And in their world, the comfort of others almost always comes before their own peace. But this illusion is fragile. There are moments, tiny, unguarded cracks where the mask slips. Maybe they stare out the window too long, or their voice trembles mid-sentence, or they laugh at something sad because they can't express the truth behind it. Those are the micro glimpses into their real emotional state. Brief flashes of vulnerability, that vanish just as quickly as they appear. What makes this so paradoxical and fascinating is that their silence and composure make them appear mysterious, even powerful. People are drawn to the INFJ's calm because it feels safe. But few realize that this serenity is not born from peace. It's born from restraint. Their quietness isn't emptiness, it's emotional discipline. So the next time you meet an INFJ who seems composed no matter what's happening around them, remember this: that calm isn't always calm. Sometimes it's a storm disguised as still water, a performance of peace that hides the beautiful, terrifying depth beneath. Because for an INFJ, silence isn't the absence of emotion. It's the armor built to contain it. Fourthly, the fear of misunderstanding. If there's one thing that truly haunts an INFJ, it's being misunderstood. Not disliked, not ignored, misunderstood. For someone who feels emotions on such a deep, layered level, being seen incorrectly can feel like a small kind of heartbreak. It's not just about people getting their words wrong, it's about being seen as something they're not, when their intentions were pure all along. INFJs think and feel in metaphors, layers, and meanings. Their inner world is a web of connections, emotional, spiritual, psychological, all woven together. But when they try to express that complexity out loud, it rarely comes out the way it feels inside. What they say sounds simple compared to what they mean. So instead of feeling understood, they feel reduced. Like their depth has been translated into a language too shallow to carry it. Over time, this constant mismatch between intention and perception teach the INFJ one painful lesson. It's safer to stay quiet than to be misunderstood again. So they start speaking less, sharing less, revealing less. They begin editing their own emotions before anyone else can. Their silence becomes a shield, one built from too many moments of, "that's not what I meant," or "you don't get it," or worse, "you're overreacting." Psychologically, this connects to what's known as empathic inhibition, when a person suppresses emotional expression out of fear that it will be misinterpreted or rejected. For INFJs, this isn't about shyness, it's about protection. They've spent years watching people misread their kindness as weakness, their insight as arrogance, or their quiet as disinterest. Eventually, they stop trying to correct the narrative and simply withdraw from it. Here's the paradox that makes INFJs so fascinating. They crave connection more than almost any other type, yet they fear it just as much. They long for someone who can meet them at their depth, someone who doesn't flinch when they show their emotional truth. But when connection starts to feel unsafe, they retreat into solitude, convincing themselves they're better off alone. It's not loneliness they fear, it's being known incorrectly. Their silence then becomes both a sanctuary and a prison. In their quiet, they can think, feel, and exist without being misread. But that same quiet keeps the world from ever fully knowing who they are. And the saddest part? Sometimes they desperately want to explain themselves, to tell someone, "You don't see it, but I'm trying to protect you from the full weight of what I feel." Yet those words stay locked inside because they already know how they'd sound to others. Dramatic, intense, too much. So they keep their stories safe within themselves, hoping that one day someone will listen with their heart instead of their ears. Someone who won't need translation to understand their silence. Because for the INFJ, words are never the problem. Being heard for what they truly mean is. And until that happens, they'll keep choosing silence. Not because they have nothing to say, but because their truth deserves to be felt, not just heard. Fifthly, emotional responsibility. One of the heaviest traits carried by INFJs is their sense of emotional responsibility. They don't just notice how people feel, they feel accountable for it. If someone in the room is upset, they take it personally. If there's tension between friends, they absorb it like a sponge and immediately start searching for ways to fix it. It's not because they think they're in control of everyone's emotions, but because their empathy tricks them into believing they should be. They see pain and automatically feel called to heal it. From the outside, this makes the INFJ look like the ultimate peacemaker, the quiet one who always listens, comforts, and calms the storm. But internally, it's a different story. Every time they carry someone else's sadness, it leaves an invisible weight inside them. Every conflict they smooth over takes a little more energy to maintain. Over time, that emotional labor turns into exhaustion, because the INFJ is constantly managing two worlds: the emotions of others and the emotions they never get to fully express themselves. Psychologists call this tendency emotional over-responsibility, and it's common in highly empathetic or intuitive personalities. It comes from a deep-rooted belief that other people's peace depends on their behavior. So, when an INFJ senses someone's discomfort, their mind immediately starts scanning for solutions. Did I say something wrong? Should I check on them again? Maybe it's my fault. This automatic guilt doesn't fade. It becomes a constant background noise in their thoughts. And here's where it becomes heartbreaking. In their quest to make everyone else comfortable, INFJs often abandon their own comfort entirely. They'll hold back their opinions to keep others happy. They'll swallow anger because they don't want to cause pain. They'll put on a calm smile while their chest tightens with unspoken emotion. Their empathy becomes self-sacrifice, an act of quiet devotion that nobody ever asks for, but they keep giving anyway. But what the INFJ rarely admits, even to themselves, is how lonely that can be. Because while they're holding space for everyone else, few people ever hold space for them. They become the emotional anchor of every relationship, steady, supportive, reliable, yet no one notices the anchor is rusting underwater. They fear that if they let go of this emotional duty, everything around them will fall apart. So they keep carrying it, even as it drags them deeper. And this is where the silence begins to make sense. When an INFJ stops talking, it's not detachment, it's preservation. Their silence is a boundary drawn in exhaustion. It's their way of saying, I can't keep fixing everyone. I need to breathe. They step back, not because they've stopped caring, but because they've cared too much for too long. Here's the twist. The very thing that makes INFJs so empathetic also teaches them one of life's hardest lessons. They're not responsible for other people's happiness. Healing doesn't mean carrying everyone else's pain. It means learning to let go of what was never theirs to hold. When they finally accept that truth, their empathy transforms from burden to brilliance. They can still feel everything deeply, but now they can do it without breaking. Because the INFJ's greatest gift isn't their ability to hold everyone else together. It's their quiet strength to release what was never theirs and still remain kind. Sixthly, when silence becomes a language. Silence means something different for an INFJ. To most people, silence is awkward, an empty space that needs to be filled. But to an INFJ, silence is communication. It's the space where everything that can't be said with words finally finds its shape. In that stillness, they aren't avoiding the world, they're translating it. Every emotion, every subtle energy, every small moment of human truth is gathered, sorted, and understood there. For the INFJ, quiet is not emptiness, it's processing. When they fall silent in a conversation, it's not because they've checked out. They're listening, not just to what's being said, but to what's not being said. The pauses, the tone shifts, the micro-expressions that most people miss. They can hear the emotion behind the words, the truth beneath the politeness. It's like watching subtitles on a movie only they can see. Psychologists describe this as high empathic attunement, a heightened sensitivity to emotional signals. But for INFJs, it's more spiritual than scientific. Their silence is a meditative state, a deep inner world where they interpret the emotions of others and make sense of their own. This is where their wisdom is born. It's where insight forms from empathy. They turn feelings into understanding and understanding into compassion. That's why conversations with INFJs can feel so profound. Even when they say little, you feel seen, truly seen. Their eyes carry quiet recognition, as if they understand things you haven't even said aloud. That's because they probably do. Their silence isn't withdrawal. It's connection through observation. They're learning you in real time, listening to your heartbeats between your words. But this silent language has another side. Because they communicate in such depth, INFJs often expect others to hear what they mean without needing to explain. When that doesn't happen, when people miss the quiet signals or misunderstand the pauses, they can feel invisible. To them, silence is an act of trust. I'm sharing my truth in the space between the words, so when it's met with noise or indifference, it hurts more than criticism ever could. Here's where the viral paradox lies. The very trait that makes INFJs so magnetic, their quiet depth, is also what isolates them. People are drawn to their stillness because it feels safe, grounding, even mysterious. But few realize that behind that stillness is a heart speaking fluently in a language most people never learn to hear. And this is what makes their silence powerful. It's not the absence of voice, it's a different kind of voice, a voice that doesn't need volume to be felt. When an INFJ is silent, they're saying 1,000 things at once. I see you. I understand you. I'm giving space for truth to breathe. Their quiet isn't a wall, it's a doorway into empathy. So the next time an INFJ sits beside you without saying a word, don't mistake that for distance. That's their way of saying, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm with you. Because for them, silence is not the opposite of communication, it's the purest form of it. Last but not least, breaking the stillness. There comes a moment for every INFJ when silence stops being peaceful and starts becoming heavy. What once felt like protection begins to feel like confinement. The emotions they've been quietly carrying, the thoughts, the empathy, the pain, all start pressing against the walls they've built inside. It's like holding your breath underwater for too long. At first it feels calm, even powerful, but eventually you have to come up for air. For an INFJ, that moment of surfacing can be both terrifying and liberating. After spending so long being the listener, the absorber, the quiet observer, they start to feel an ache that can't be ignored anymore. The need to be heard. Their silence has taught them wisdom. But now that wisdom wants to take form, to be spoken, written, shared. It's not about craving attention. It's about finally giving a voice to the parts of themselves that have been whispering for years. Psychologists call this stage emotional integration, when repressed emotions are finally processed and expressed in a healthy way. For INFJs, it often looks like opening up through writing, art, deep conversations, or quiet confessions to someone who finally feels safe. It's not dramatic or loud, it's honest. Every word they speak comes out slow, deliberate, and full of meaning, like poetry that's been waiting to exist. And here's the beautiful paradox. When an INFJ finally speaks, they don't just talk about themselves. They give voice to emotions that everyone feels but can't describe. Their truth resonates because it's not just their truth. It's universal. That's why INFJ voices, when they do emerge, have such impact. Whether it's through storytelling, art, or quiet conversation, their words tend to ripple through people's hearts long after they're spoken. But breaking the stillness isn't easy. It requires courage. The courage to risk being misunderstood again, to be vulnerable, to take up emotional space. For an INFJ who has spent a lifetime shrinking their presence to make others comfortable, this is an act of rebellion. It's the moment they stop filtering their truth for approval and start speaking it for healing. They realize that silence may have protected them, but expression is what sets them free. And here's the twist that makes this moment so powerful. When an INFJ begins to express themselves openly, their world doesn't collapse like they once feared. The people who truly see them don't run away. They lean in. They listen. Because there's something magnetic about an INFJ who finally steps out from their quiet and speaks from the heart. Their voice carries the weight of empathy, the precision of thought, and the beauty of someone who has felt everything before saying anything. So if you're an INFJ, know this. Your silence was never weakness. It was the space where your strength was growing roots. And now, when you speak, whether it's a whisper or a roar, it carries the power of everything you've ever felt. You are not quiet because you have nothing to say. You were quiet because your words were becoming truth. And when that truth finally finds its way out of you, through art, love, conversation, or creation, it doesn't just free you. It frees everyone who's ever felt unseen, unheard, or misunderstood. Because when an INFJ breaks their stillness, they don't just speak, they heal.